Hi everybody, Dana Lotwin here again, and welcome back to Tuesday Tips for Leaders of Volunteers. And this week, digging in a little deeper to some brand new tools and techniques and really activating conversations between nonprofit leaders and funders as part of the Initiative for Strategic Volunteer Engagement. Now, my dear friend and colleague Betsy McFarland has been co-leading this initiative with Jeff Goblecki from University of Maryland Do Good Institute, and I've been involved pro bono with the National Alliance for Volunteer Engagement for the last several years as a co-facilitating with Betsy and as a co-founder and doing work with the leadership team to bring all of this and other work to fruition. So we're really proud that a few days ago we launched these conversation starters. So I'm going to do a video reviewing these, and I have the link to dig deeper into the research by the Initiative for Strategic Volunteer Engagement that we did in 2022 that's informing these answers in these toolkits. And please spread this information far and wide, this video and the link with more resources from the National Alliance and the Initiative for Strategic Volunteer Engagement. So, driven by the power of volunteer energy and grounded in comprehensive research, the Initiative for Strategic Volunteer Engagement launched with a single objective: to provide practical recommendations for funders and nonprofit leaders to invest in strategic volunteer engagement. And this strategy is a win-win-win. I talked about this a little bit last week in how to ask for things in this budget season now that we're in May. And I've also mentioned the strategic volunteer engagement and the National Alliance in my kind of cool trends and things to look out for in 2023 January videos. But really what this does is benefits nonprofits and volunteers and strengthens funder investments. The Initiative for Strategic Volunteer Engagement is a joint effort by funders and nonprofits to promote more thoughtful and strategic volunteer engagement that benefits the community served, the host agency, the volunteers, and the funders. And through practical and research-informed tools and resources, we equip nonprofits to engage volunteers with purpose and intention. And we equip funders to invest in strategic volunteer engagement. So again, check out the link to the full research and all of these tools mentioned in this toolkit. I'm just going to do kind of a highlights video here if this is the easier way for you to get your information. So organizations that embrace strategic volunteer engagement prioritize and invest in supporting volunteers to ensure success. Strategic volunteer engagement provides tangible and long-term benefits for funders and nonprofits, and it's really just good grant making, and it's good business. It's good community relations. Strategic volunteer engagement is most successful as a shared responsibility when all involved are invested in its success and sustainability. And strategic volunteer engagement requires resources, support, leadership, just like any other core business function. So this is something that's woven into the foundation of an agency's strategic plan, or if you're new to this idea and you just want tips for reaching out to funders and having these conversations, here's what we found with our research and what we recommend. So when appropriately invested in, strategic volunteer engagement increases an organization's capacity, links funders' investments to lasting positive change, and strengthens community. So this again is complex and involves a lot of community relations, and this is a great way to start making that impact of your mission that much more tangible and better and positive for the community that you're with. For nonprofits, it creates stronger programs and operations that drive mission and accomplishment. For funders, it's greater impact of grant-making dollars. And for volunteers, it's meaningful and fulfilling volunteer experiences that activate all of your volunteers' diverse skill sets to meet real community needs. In the research from 2022, with interviews and surveys and focus groups with funders and nonprofit leaders, the results were that there's a really obvious gap between how funders and nonprofit leaders see volunteers. So 2 out of 3 nonprofit leaders do believe that volunteers increase the quality of their services and extend their reach. And we know that's true from other data points with lots of organizations. 1 in 3 funders, however, have never received a funding request specifically for volunteer engagement. And so to kind of fix that gap or that giant miscommunication and align funders and nonprofit volunteer services, here's what nonprofits can do as far as action items. Set the foundation. Formalize volunteer engagement as an organizational priority by building it into the strategic plan. Hiring a volunteer engagement professional. CVA is a really great way to understand who's an expert in volunteer administration. And creating volunteer engagement policies and procedures. And I have a lot more tips about that with other videos. So I'll link to some other videos during this one that you can check out, and links in the video description below. When you set the foundation as a nonprofit leader, you're formalizing volunteer engagement, again, as an organizational priority. And then you prioritize that with your budget strategy. So you have to put your money where your mouth is as an organizational leader. And some of you out there might be wearing many hats, your development, your HR, your volunteer resources, or you're splitting your time as an executive director, department of one. This is for you specifically. If you're in middle management, in volunteer services, great. Take this messaging, share these links, share this information with your executive director, general manager, CEO, and kind of keep the conversation going from the grassroots up. If you're a volunteer services leader or nonprofit organizational leader, really start a dialogue with the whole agency, internal and external, with the community about the benefits and challenges of volunteer engagement. Revisit recruitment and retention strategies. COVID-19 and the landscape really changed volunteerism, and that means that traditional strategies may no longer succeed. So assess what aspects are working or not, and for whom in the community, in the organization. Then demonstrate and communicate that impact. Part of what nonprofits need to do is show and tell the data, the impact, the anecdotes, qualitative, quantitative, when they're doing funding requests, that then the funders can see, by the data, by the numbers, the volunteers in this organization are already doing well. Let's give them more funding and build out those resources for an even better and increased capacity building and mission impact and sustainability in the long term and adaptability to change. So for funders, your action steps are to make support for volunteer engagement visible. We already have a few great funder and philanthropy champions around volunteer engagement who helped with this study and this research. So as a funder, when you're putting out requests for proposals or to grantees, include questions about volunteer engagement in those grant applications and in reporting. And that can help nonprofit organizations who maybe haven't been doing much data collection or record keeping or impact notation of volunteer services on their mission. That can help teach them, or you can provide them the funding and the resources to do that data better and show and tell. Also, as a funder, diversify and track impact. So monitoring volunteer data beyond the numbers, hours, and financial value. Again, colleague and friend Dr. Sue Carter-Kale is fantastic at spinning this, so I'll have some links to her work as well. Encourage nonprofits to holistically capture volunteer contributions by asking them impact-driven questions in grant proposals, applications, and evaluations. Keep volunteer engagement on the agenda. Ask for updates about volunteer impact and dilemmas during check-in conversations, site visits, and grant reports as a funder. Budget for funding volunteer engagement operations. If you're in charge of a big fund or a philanthropic foundation, capacity building, which I mentioned in last week's Tuesday tips, I'll link to again. So encouraging grant partners to include budget line items where strategically appropriate to fund volunteer engagement professionals, volunteer management technology, and engagement training and coaching for staff, which is part of what I do, but a lot of organizations do that. A lot of national professional associations like Alive, VMPC in Canada, new volunteer initiatives happening in Australia under their national strategy. So there's a lot of the CCVA, Council for Certification of Volunteer Administration. So there's a lot of places where training for volunteer professionals can occur and does occur with free or very, very low cost webinar, per webinar cost, or membership cost. And also as a funder, you can promote professional development of volunteer engagement professionals in organizations by funding this. Support and share research with each other. So share seamlessly is something another friend and colleague, Craig Young of Inspiring Service, likes to have as a catchphrase. So share that information and research as openly as possible. And become an advocate within funder circles and networks and professional associations for others to get the idea and have these conversations and point them towards this research and this data to help get other funders excited about the real positive impacts that occur with strategic volunteer engagement. And then recognize excellence of your grantees and your success stories. So if you're a funder or nonprofit leader looking to take your strategic volunteer engagement practice to the next level, we absolutely invite you to join the community at strategicvolunteerengagement.org. That's where the initiative is living online. And here you'll find information, links, more than I'm able to talk about in a 10-minute video, links to the community of professionals committed to and engaged in the work of strategic volunteer engagement, and more tools, more resources, including assessment guides, measurement frameworks, and impact tools. So I hope that you're as excited as I am about the launch of the initiative for strategic volunteer engagement and all of these cool resources, tools, techniques, conversation starters, ways to activate yourself and your organization to be an advocate for the value of volunteers in mission impact and capacity building. And we'll see you next week with more Tuesday tips. Let me know if you have any questions or comments, and like and subscribe to the channel if you're not part of the Cool Kids Club yet. So we'll see you next week. Take care.